of the Money Panel, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now, this channel is here to help you understand both the practical steps of managing money, the financial education side, but also to help you understand your relationship with money, because we know that behind every financial situation, there's a set of thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors. And when we combine the practical element with the transformational relationship with money side, that's when the magic happens. Now, I'm a qualified financial advisor. I've been in the profession for 20 years, and I'm a multi-award winning financial coach and trainer. So make sure that you don't miss any of these videos. We put them out every single week on this channel. Hit the subscription button and the notification icon bell so that you don't miss out. This morning, I wanted to talk about a really interesting subject that came up on the podcast this week, which is about children's pensions. Now, many of you were quite surprised and didn't realize that you could start saving into a pension for your children. And it's not surprising, really. It's not particularly talked about. You know, we all hear about saving for children, child trust funds, junior ISAs, even stocks and shares ISAs sometimes on occasions. But there's definitely not enough financial education out there to explain that there is actually options to invest in children's pensions. So what I thought I would do today is to talk about pensions versus ISAs for children. Now, Shah Wasman and I were talking about this on the podcast earlier in one of our earlier episodes, and she was talking about how that was one of the first things that she did for her son, Jet. And I did the same for my boys, although not quite when they were born, but a few years after that. So let's talk about pensions versus ISAs. So the first thing to think about is there's kind of three main differences between investing in pensions versus investing in ISAs. Now, I'm not talking about cash ISAs in this instance. I'm talking about stocks and shares ISAs. And the reason I'm doing that is because there is a massive difference between saving and investing. Saving for children is where you're looking to put money aside that they can access fairly easily and fairly quickly. So this could be pocket money that they're wanting to save, perhaps that they can access in a couple of years' time, or they can access for treats throughout the year, perhaps a pocket money type account, or perhaps they're in their teenage years and you're looking at putting some money aside for university. When you've not got a huge amount of time on your side, then investing in the stock market is not necessarily the best way to be saving for your children, because you haven't got that time to ride out, you know, some of the ups and downs that happen and occur in the stock market. So I'm not talking about cash ISAs in this instance. I'm talking about stocks and shares ISAs and pensions. So the three differences are access, tax, and limits, i.e. how much you can contribute. So let's just talk through each of these three things, and then I've got something for you at the end of this video. So the first thing is access. So there's quite a big difference between investing into a stocks and shares ISA or a junior ISA versus a children's pension. And if you're wanting to explore children's pensions, they're often referred to as SIPs, self-invested personal pensions. They're like the sexy version of a personal pension. So when you're Googling something about children's pensions, you'll often see come up like junior SIPs. It's exactly the same as a personal pension. There's just a couple of minor differences, which I'll explore with you in a second. So from an access perspective, if you invest into a children's pension, they won't be able to access the benefits from that investment until, under current legislation, the age of 55. Now, there's pros and cons of this, right? The great thing about that is they can't access that money until they're 55. And the downside is they can't access that money until they're 55. So you've really got to think about, you know, if you're saving for their university, for example, then a junior pension is not going to be the best investment strategy, because you're going to need to access that perhaps when they're, you know, 19, 20, 21 and beyond. So access is really important. With a stocks and shares ISA, you can access the benefits from that investment at any time. There's no minimum time scales. A big misconception actually of the stock market is you've got to invest for 5 years or 10 years or a set number of years. And the golden rule really is that if you're looking for long-term growth, i.e. anything more than approximately 5 years, then you could consider the stock market. But because the stock market does go up and down, then, you know, that's why you need to have time on your side. So if the market comes down a little bit, Doesn't matter, you just leave it in there until it comes back up again. But obviously if it's going down and your child is about to go to university and you need to access that money, that's not going to be a great time for you to start taking the benefits from that investment growth. So that's why there's a lot of, the recommendation is that you should ideally have at least 5 years, ideally a little bit longer in my opinion, to invest in that type of environment. Now, we're not going to cover risk and those sorts of things on today's video. We'll talk about that on a separate one, but I think that that is really important to consider. So what is the purpose for which you're saving? If it's for university and they're young or in their teenage years, then pensions is not going to be the best way, but a stocks and shares ISAs might be something for you to consider. Now, from a tax perspective, there's huge benefits for investing in pensions and in ISAs. So with an ISA, you all each individually have an ISA allowance, which is every tax year, which starts on the 6th of April this year and finishes on the 5th of April. So between now and the 5th of April, you've got your annual allowance of £20,000. That can go into your own ISA, either into cash or in stocks and shares or a bit of both. And for a junior ISA, that limit is reduced. It's £4,368 this tax year, which is such a random figure, isn't it? I have to write it down because I can never remember the exact figure, £4,368. Now, and you can use that allowance in addition to your own 20,000. Okay, so that's the limits for ISAs. Now, your 20,000 limit, you can split that between cash and stocks and shares, or you can put the full whack in stocks and shares, but you just can't exceed that limit per tax year. So you could put 20,000 in now and 20,000 in after the 6th of April. And an ISA is an individual savings account, so it has to be held in a sole name. So if you're in a relationship, it could be one for you and one for your partner. Now, most people don't have like a spare 40 grand hanging around. So, you know, most people can stick well within those limits. And as that money grows, it grows tax-free. So it's very tax efficient. There's a small amount of tax that's paid in a stocks and shares environment, but it's still very, very tax efficient. And whatever that fund grows to over the however long you're invested, when you come to then take the benefits of that in years to come, it's completely tax-free. You haven't got to pay something that they call capital gains tax, which is when you make a capital gain. So if you start off with 5 grand and it grows to 15, that 10,000 profit you've made is tax-free. So that's the great thing about ISAs. And the same applies to a junior ISA. The only difference with a junior ISA is your limit is slightly lower, and the child legally then has access to that money at age 18. Now, let me tell you, there is no chance that I would want my boys to have access to that kind of money at the age of 18 for 2 reasons. One, they're just going to splurge it on guitars or iPods or iPhones or something random like that. And second of all, I don't think actually that's a great age to be having to make those kind of financial decisions. So this is one of the reasons why I actually don't like investing in junior ISAs, because I want to have a bit more control over when they should have that money. Now, you could just invest in your own name into your own stocks and shares ISA, and then you can choose when to pass that to them. But the downside of that is if you're reaching your limit, you know, then you may want to then consider alternatives, but just something to think about. So that's tax. The difference between ISAs and pensions is obviously the contribution when you make into an ISA, you get tax-free growth at the end when you come to cash that in. With a pension, you also get tax-free growth while it's in that pension, but you also get tax relief. I don't know why they call it relief, because relief is almost like taking away, but it's like a tax addition, if you like, to your contribution. So for a child, for example, there are limits to how much you can put into a pension. So for a child, or if you're not, well, let's keep it really simple actually. For a child, you can put £240 maximum per month into a junior pension. So that's £2,880 per year. This is per tax year. So that £2,880 gets tax added to £3,600. So that's £720 of free money that you get from the government by putting in that £2,880. You could put it in all at once. You don't have to drip feed it in monthly, but that's free money. And the same for your pensions, exactly the same for your pensions. You get that, that's 20% tax added, rather than, I don't know why they call it tax relief, tax added to that pension. It's free money. Why would you not do this, people? The reason people don't do it is because they think pensions are complicated and they're too risky. But you can control that. You can control the level of risk by going into a very well diversified investment portfolio. And again, we'll cover that on a separate video. You can stop and start your contributions as well. So if you start off with £25 a month, for example, then you could stop and start that whenever you want to. Perhaps you have your first child, you start it, then you have a second child and you think, oh, the finances are getting really tight now. You can pause those contributions. So you're not committed once you get started. So from a limit perspective for children, you are limited to £3,600 gross, but you contribute £2,880 net, essentially. So that's the maximum, £2,880 as a one-off lump sum, or you can break that down into a monthly £240 per month. That's the limit. Okay. With, as we've just said, with junior ISAs, your limit is 4,368 random pounds. So there is a difference between them. Now, in an ideal world, do both, because then you've got the junior ISA that will mature at age 18, and then the pension will be left for them until age 55. Under current legislation, that's the earliest that they could access that pension benefit. The same for yourself. And as I said, there's pros and cons of them being able to access that money. But let me give you the stats on this. If you invest £1 per day into a children's pension from the day that they're born until they're 20, and if as parents, right, it's a struggle financially when kids are born. Like, I totally understand this. So this is something that grandparents could be doing, not just parents. So if you invested £1 a day from when they're born until they're 20, making an assumption that that pension will grow by an average of 7% a year, which isn't guaranteed, but let's work on the basis of an average of 7% growth per year. Some years will be higher, some years could be lower, for example, and added on to the tax added that you get, then the pension at the age of 65 could be worth just shy of £500,000. Like, that's amazing, right? Why would you not do this, people? So really think about this. Talk to your parents, talk to the grandparents about doing this. It's a great relief for inheritance tax as well. So if your parents, for example, are looking to pass down some of their wealth through the generations, this is a great way to do it. The kids don't even need to necessarily know about it. But the great thing about that is that if your parents have got excess income, i.e. their income is higher than their outgoings, they can pass on some of that extra spare money. So they could do like £240 a month into a pension, and that can come out of their estate free of inheritance tax. It's a way to get rid of money, which I know sounds crazy to some people, but getting rid of money out of your estate without being taxed. So if you're over the inheritance tax threshold, it's a great way of releasing wealth through the generations. And I think what a lovely thing to do. What a really lovely thing to do. So great from an inheritance tax perspective. Also, as your own pensions or your children's pensions are invested, as that money grows, if, for example, your estate is worth more than the inheritance tax threshold, which currently is around 650,000, there are some additional allowances on top, which I won't go into, but let's say 650,000, then your estate, if it's worth more than 650, could be liable to inheritance tax. Now, your pensions don't come into that equation. So if you're building up £500,000 for your children into a pension, it's outside of your estate, it's ring fenced. So it's a great, not just for the tax credit going, it's not a tax credit as in what you know as a tax credit, but I don't like to call it tax relief because it's not a relief. A relief is taking away. But the tax add that the government give you, this 20% adds, and actually 40% for you personally as grown-ups if you're an additional rate taxpayer. But for children, 20% tax added does not form part of your estate. So again, it's another really great way to reduce tax from an inheritance tax perspective. So I think I've given you plenty of reasons why this is definitely an area that you should be exploring. Now, I wrote a blog 18 months ago about how I actually went through the process of opening my children's pension. So I'll pop a link to that blog in the notes. So you can have a read of that. I actually talked through my whole journey of how did I select the pension, what fund did I invest in, because it can be a bit of a minefield out there. I completely understand. And that's coming from somebody who, you know, has been a financial advisor for a long time. So I totally get that. But if you're wanting to just go away and find out straight away what you need to look at, go and have a look at Junior SIPP, SIPP, stands for Self-Invested Personal Pension. It's exactly the same as a personal pension, it's just a sexy version. They can be slightly more expensive than personal pensions because they have a few more bells and whistles. But think of it like a car. It's like a souped up BMW version of a pension. And it'll give you a few additional options. And you can start this at any age for children. You can start it from the day that they're born, as long as you do it in their name. So you'll have their date of birth, you'll need their national insurance number. But aside from that, you can start it at any age. So it's a really great opportunity to be looking at this for your children and just weighing up really the differences between, do you go into a long-term pension for their future, or do you have a look perhaps at a junior ISA or even just a stocks and shares ISA in your own name? So I hope that's useful for you. Any questions, give me a shout. Lovely to see you all, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Take care. Bye.